So it happened again. In an age of greater hatred and rage than we can remember in recent time, in which people, marginalized groups, insult entire categories of people, use race, use orientation, use gender, use religion to to disparage entire clusters of people, we need to stand up and do something about it. And I want to raise an issue that came up last week. There was a conference on battling anti Semitism. That sounds like a good thing. You should be against hating Jews just because they're Jews. And there was a congressperson there, Representative Andy Levin, who is the representative from Michigan. He's a wonderful congressperson, and I agree with him almost always. He said very loudly that we need to condemn anti Semitism. He said, I'm quoting him, we have to loudly and consistently call out anti Semitism in all its forms, whether it comes from adversaries or countries that are our friends, whether it's promulgated intentionally or unknowingly. So, in that spirit, with the idea that sometimes friends say things they shouldn't, and then it's an act of friendship to call out and to tell them why that's wrong, I want to raise something he said that I didn't like so much. As part of his talk, he said, quote, unless Palestinian human rights are respected, we cannot fight anti-Semitism. Now, I want to bracket the content for a minute. I agree we need to fight for Palestinian human rights. But the claim that unless we do this policy thing, then this form of bigotry will never go away, that's wrong, it's dangerous, and it's ugly. So you can be in favor of Palestinian human rights. You can be an anti-Semite. You can have different positions on the two. They're not related. And you don't only fight bigotry by getting rid of bad policies or policies you don't agree with. You say bigotry is always wrong. So let me give you the same sentence with a couple different scenarios just so you can hear how really wrong it is and how accustomed we are to a kind of soft anti-Semitism. Here's the same sentence in another format. Unless we respect religious beliefs about who's really married, we can't fight homophobia. Ugh, that sounds awful. Unless we respect the right to life, we can't battle sexism. Terrible. Unless we protect our borders, we can't fight Islamophobia. Really? Unless we respect voting restrictions, we can't fight racism. Each of those sentences says the exact same thing, but about a different group. If you don't, and then pick the policy that's your policy issue, then we'll never get rid of this kind of hatred. But of course, that's outrageous. You fight bigotry regardless of some people's policies. So it's not the cause of disputes that causes bigotry. Bigotry is what causes bigotry. To blame the victims of hatred as if it's their behavior that justifies hating them as a group, well, that's just obscene. So in this case, to claim that we can't fight anti-Semitism until we take on the issue of Palestinian human rights or national rights, that's just as ugly as those other ideas. No, you fight anti-Semitism because you fight anti-Semitism. And then if you're willing to battle for Palestinian national autonomy, great, do that too. But the one has nothing to do with the other. Now, a lot of people have jumped on that and used this as an example to say, you see, that's how the anti-Semites work. And they're not wrong, but they're only half right. So I need us to say not just the statement was wrong, which it was. Let's battle anti-Semitism, period. Let's battle racism, period. Let's fight homophobia and sexism, period. Now here's some policies we need to talk about. So the first thing I want to make clear, it is possible to criticize Israel or policies of Israel without slipping into anti-Semitism. And here's how you know whether you've done that or not. If you're criticizing a policy of Israel and your solution is to fix the policy, then you're engaged in a reasonable policy debate. But if you're critical of an Israeli policy and therefore we should get rid of Israel, or therefore Israel is irredeemably evil, or therefore we need to isolate every single Israeli, sorry, That's not a policy discussion, that's bigotry. Second, in fighting the occupation, Representative Levin is absolutely correct that we have to affirm the dignity of Palestinians and their right to national self expression. It doesn't make sense to affirm the dignity of Israelis and their right to self expression and then deny it to the Palestinians. But it also doesn't make sense to affirm it for the Palestinians without affirming it for the Israelis. Both peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, have the right to establish secure, democratic self determination. And well meaning people can slip onto dangerous ground when they somehow approve of or make permissible group hatreds because of policies they care about. So, the solution, my friends, condemn bigotry. Condemn it absolutely, condemn it without qualification and without linking it to the behavior of the victims. 2, advocate for justice and inclusion on their own merits without weaponizing them as a way to marginalize Jews or blacks or LGBTQ people or women or anyone. Everybody's human dignity ought to be absolute. Everybody deserves a world without bigotry, without hatred, without stereotype, a world in which we are all seen, B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image.